So if we go to our Windows key on the left-hand corner of the screen, otherwise just the one on your keyboard there, and just type in REV, you'll start to get the Revits. Now remember last week, one of the things before we opened up that I mentioned about Revit and the Revit Viewer 2019 in there? Who remembers what I said about Revit Viewer?
Don't use it.
Never
Yeah,
close it.
good. Well, don't use it when you're trying to do some work that you want to save. You can use it to view projects, but obviously, you know, as I said, you'll lose a bit of your life because you just can't save. It looks the same, works the same, you can draw in it, go to save. Sorry, you can't save in Viewer, so you've got to close it down and start what you've started again. So we always open Revit 2019. And once it thinks about it for a minute and starts to open, what you might find too is when you've opened an older file, so if you've got a 2018, 2017 or whatever Revit file, at this stage you'll get a little dialog box that says, do you want to upgrade your model to this version? And that's quite normal. So if you say yes, it just upgrades it so it can open in the newer version. If you, for some reason, decided that I don't want to save it in this year date because I've only got 2017 where I'm using it or something like that, as soon as you press save, you can say yes, okay, upgrade it, but if you close it down, it's okay, it's still saved in the 2017 or 18 version. As soon as you press save, it becomes a 2019 or whatever version you're using, and you can't take it back to an older version. Okay. Unlike AutoCAD, where you can actually open a file up, if you're in 2019, you do a save as and go right back to, I think, 2003 or something like that in AutoCAD, which is actually very handy because as we send things to engineers and those sorts of things, we often save them right back to early, so it doesn't matter what version of AutoCAD they're working on, they can open it. But Revit's locked down a little bit tighter. They spend a lot more money on Revit, so I think that's why they want you to keep upgrading. So when we get to this interface here, we've got really just a basic interface that basically is going to open up an existing model, or we're going to create a new model, and then we can do the same with open in families, which I said we'll talk about a bit later. So if I open an existing model or I go to a new, if opening a existing model, it's just going to browse through my documents in my computer, USB, wherever I've saved it, I can open it through there. If we're going to grab a new project, it comes up with this dialog box that's asking for a new project template, and we will always use the architectural template in this class. So I think I explained last week that the construction, architectural, structural and mechanical used to always be different versions of Revit. So you used to buy into whichever discipline you were working, but now they've got them all under the one banner. However, if you opened up a structural template, it would be set up to start doing something that, a little bit more engineering focused rather than an architectural building or design focus. So the same with the mechanical and that sort of thing. So mechanical is all set up really for, you know, duct work and all that sort of stuff as well in the template. It doesn't say that we can't use those things when we go into the architectural template. So architectural template, and then we just say OK. So it's going to create a new project from the template that Revit's given us. Okay, so we don't need to create it as a template, we're going to just create it as a project. So there's two types of file types that we'll get out of Revit, RTE, which is a Revit template file, and an RVT, which is a Revit project file. So we start with a template file but convert it to a project. Okay, and that'll make a bit more sense as we go through, but it'll be a RVT file that it opens up. So that's all we've got to do, and we start with just a blank screen. There's no model in this one. So last week we opened that sample project. We could actually see all those things that someone had worked on. This one we've pretty well started from scratch. There's nothing there. But what the template's given us is all of these views set up. There's nothing in those views, but the views are actually made as part of the template. It's placed in a section marker and some elevation markers. So these little black blobby things with like points on the end are little cameras, I suppose, and that's the north top. The south is the bottom by default in the template. So this means that from this right here, looking down is the northern elevation. So in here, this north elevation is coming from that view there, looking down the page. So if we were to click on that northern elevation or double click on the front of that head, it takes us to that camera view looking down here. The southern is here, and east and west obviously coming from the sides there. So why they give us that to start with, not only does it set up our elevation names for us, but it gives us a bit of an idea of where we should start drawing, because there's no sort of reference in this world of modelling in here. It's a really big open space that can be kilometres long if we want. So this is really designed to say, start drawing in here, because your views are going to be here, 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 and here. So if I started drawing my house here, I would probably have half of a northern elevation. Sort of the view range is sort of set to about that wide, so it might maybe have half the building from the north here. Same with the south, it would have that southern bit. It would have this elevation, but it wouldn't have this one here. Okay, because we're sitting behind it. So when we start drawing, always sort of start drawing in around here. Okay, doesn't matter if it's a bit off the side, because sometimes we don't know what the shape's going to end up like, but somewhere in around here is a good starting point. So that's what that's for. So we'll go through what all this interface is, and the reason I do this is because I use the terminology a fair bit when I'm talking, so you don't have to keep looking and see where that little white cursor's going. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks you'll say, if I say something, you'll know what I'm talking about without having to look up. And the terminology will start to just build on you. I won't expect you to get it straight away. That's totally fine. So that's why I handed out this, and we'll do a little refresher of that next week as well. So just sort of write down the answers to these. So the number 1 arrow is pointing up to this little ribbon up here. And this little set of icons is known as the quick access toolbar. So I might say up on your quick access toolbar, see the little 3D house icon? There might be a little drop down arrow next to that. Okay, so that's the sort of references I'll use. Go to your quick access toolbar, find the little 3D house icon. Okay, so quick access toolbar. What's number 2 pointing at? Number 2 is pointing down to the status bar. So this is this little prompt down here, right down at the bottom. So mine says click to select tab for alternates, control add, shift unselect. Does everyone have that on their screen? Something like that. So that's the status of the command that you're in. So it actually gives you little prompts of what to do next. So if I started to use the move tool, it might say pick the point of the object that you want to move from. And then when you pick that point, it'll say place the object in the position that you'd like to move it to. So it actually sort of starts to think about or tell you what you should be doing. So it's quite good when you're first learning commands, because there might be a couple of steps in there that you forget. Number 3 is pointing right up to the top to the little file icon. So that's just a file tab. 2018, that file tab was never there. It was just a big blue R that took over that section, and that was their version of the file tab. So they just changed it to actually be the same as any Windows program. It says file now, and the blue Revit R does nothing now. So file tab. So the file tab, if we click on it, we've got some options in terms of what we can do. We can then, it's got some of the things that the first setup had. So that first setup window that we could go to a new project, open an existing project. We can save through here, do save as, and we can export to different drawing files. So if we want to export to CAD files, etc., you can do it through here, plus the printing option. The save buttons you don't tend to use too much unless you've actually just opened a project and you want to save it as something. But otherwise, in the quick access toolbar, we looked at first point, there's a little save icon there. So that tends to be the one that you would click while you're working on something, rather than have to click File and then find Save. So in Revit, there's always about 2 to 4 ways to do the same thing, and it just depends on which way you prefer to go, which is actually quite a good thing for a program. It doesn't mean that everyone's brain works the same. Some people like to go a different direction to get somewhere. Revit's the same. So the File tab also gives us some options. One of the things I didn't mention was just closing the program. So you can go File, Close, or you can just hit that once. Okay, again, a couple of ways to do the same thing. But the little, and then exit Revit, there's number 3. So I can press that, or that to close. The options icon there gives us obviously lots of other options. So this is all to do with like setting up your machine, customizing it, saving some files in terms of some backup files and those sorts of things as well. At the moment, as a general setup for Revit, the default reminder is 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, if you haven't pressed save, you'll get a message that come up, you haven't saved, do you want to save now? Okay. I always suggest do it. Don't ever you'll probably see me say cancel if I'm demonstrating something. It doesn't really matter if I lose it. But you may as well press save because it doesn't delay your drawing. Some programs, when you press save, there's a 10-second delay till the wheels start to churn and you go, oh, I wasted a bit of time. SketchUp's probably one of the worst ones if you're working on big files. People hate saving SketchUp because it seems to whirl and whirl and whirl and whirl and whirl until it saves, so they just tend to put it off. But then when you lose your file and you haven't saved for more than 30 minutes, you've got a lot more work to catch up with. So there's a couple of things there, how the interface looks, the graphics, etc., all through down here. The spell checker, customizing that, etc. Rendering and where you're going to put some of the materials, etc. So there's quite a bit of customization that's available. Anything that you do on your computer here, though, will default back to its out-of-the-box state by the time you get back in. So once you shut down, it comes back to the normal. But anything you do at home will stay like that, and same within your office. So some people might prefer that. Different types of configurations and steps and all that sort of stuff. So that was number 3. Number 4, what are we looking at? Number 4 is just looking at the ribbon. So I think I mentioned that last week. So the ribbon is really anywhere from underneath that quick access toolbar, all these tabs right down to sort of where it says build, circulation, model, etc. So that sort of big part there is called the ribbon. And the ribbon is like an Autodesk thing. They brought it out, I think, in about 2006 or something like that with AutoCAD. A lot of people that have been using AutoCAD for a long time hated the ribbon, and I think in about 2010 or 11 they actually made it not be able to change back to the old look in AutoCAD and there was a big uproar. But Revit went straight along the ribbon route. And why the ribbon works quite well, I don't know, has anyone ever used programs that tend to have lots of little bars down the side? Photoshop's one of them, old AutoCAD, SketchUp, those sorts of things. Is you tend to lose so much of your work screen by more and more toolbars, and sometimes on those toolbars you might be putting one of those toolbars on the side to access one tool, but you have to have this whole split of icons down. So what they did with the ribbon was sort of tried to embed it all so it was all hidden underneath different layers, I suppose, so it's just streamlined. Now you can minimize that more by using this little arrow here, so it cycles, this one here, it cycles through 3 options and actually deletes more or closes it up more and more. So if you ever lose things, it might be that you've cycled through a couple of times here. So you just have to click on it. So the ribbon is broken down into panels. They're known as panels. So we've got a select panel, a build panel, circulation panel, model panel, room and area panel, etc. So everyone see there's like a little faint line between those, so that makes up a panel. So with the build panel, for example, inside that panel is then buttons. Okay, so these buttons are in a panel. So I might sort of say to you, in the build panel, we're going to click on the door button. Okay, so that gives you a bit of an idea of where we're going. And some of the buttons have a little arrow under them, and they're known as split buttons. So the wall, for example, you can see is different to the door. The door doesn't have a little black arrow under it, but the wall does. So a split button means that that button then has multiple buttons associated with it, depending on where you want to go. But if we look at the wall button for an example, you can see that it's actually got 3 sort of wall types: architectural, structural and wall by face, plus 2 sort of sub walls further down. At the moment they're greyed out because there's no wall being used. But what these 3 will do is, notice the icon at the top here is the same as this top here. That little icon is the same as that. So the last command that you used will be what is on the front face of the button. So if you know that you've only ever used an architectural wall, and that's what we'll be using in this discipline, and the reason it's up the top to start with is because we open an architectural template, you don't need to hit the bottom half of the button to then pick that. You can just hit the top button and you know it's going to that architectural wall. Okay. So once you sort of feel comfortable with the icons, you'll sort of know what you're clicking. Now, if we hit the door button, you notice now how the ribbon changes and everything to do with what you might be using with the door comes up. So it's like a modify panel that comes up. And it's assuming that we're going to sort of put a door in the project, but this little one here with the green strip along is known as the options bar. So that's the options bar underneath there. So there's another little icon there, number 5, pointing to the options bar. So 4 was the ribbon, which had panels in it and buttons, and then some buttons, when you press them, will have further options. Okay. So it might be that we're going to use, say, the copy command or something, and the option might be that we can do multiple copies. That might be the only option with them, but it'll be like a little tick box or something like that. So you'll see the options will change all the time depending on what buttons. Sometimes there's no other option, it's literally, that's the command. So when you've selected something in Revit like we just did, selecting a button, but we don't want to continue with that command, escape gets us out of the command. And if we've actually started the command, we need to do it twice. So escape will stop us placing one door if we're replacing one, and to get right back to the ribbon twice on the escape. So what we tend to have, our hand resting near the keyboard, we tend to use that escape quite a lot to get out of your commands. And we'll also go through the controls with the mouse tonight as well, how we can use that to orbit, etc. Now number 6 is pointing to the properties palette. Now in the properties palette, you might find that your machines are docked slightly different to mine. Just hit escape there. Yeah. So your properties palette and project browser are like, you've got properties, stops to there, and then you've got a project browser underneath. Mine's docked in a way that I've actually now got 2 tabs down the bottom. So I can actually open up the tabs and change mine from full length properties to full length project browser. Okay, now they can be closed down accidentally by hitting that little cross, and they can be dragged apart like that, like that. So you can see now I've got a project browser here and a properties here. Now if I want to put, what did you have on top of yours? Properties on the top? Yep. So if I want my project browser to look like yours, I can put it somewhere here. There. So there's different places where you're going to drag to get it to click one under the top. So the reason they introduced that one tabbing facility was so that you got the full view of your either project browser or properties. You don't have to keep sort of looking at underneath and scrolling up as much with the sidebar. So I tend to like to work with mine docked one on top of the other, which is somewhere there. No, you never get it back once I do it. There. Yeah. So yeah, you'll find that I just tend to work the tabs through there. So we've got properties and project browsers. So that's number 6 and 7 on your little column there. Now the properties palette is very useful because it tells us the properties of, at the moment, the properties of this view. So if you have a look, if you haven't selected anything in the view, it's saying the properties of this floor plan. This view is a ground floor plan, even though there's nothing drawn. It's telling me what the scale's set at. It's telling me the detail level, etc. And if you scroll right down, you'll see there's multiple things it can tell me about that view. If I've actually selected something in the model like a wall, the properties will be everything to do with the wall. How high it is, how long it is, whatever. Okay, so that's all the information that's we've got to work with, or to change a wall or a door or whatever we want to click on. The project browser is our way of navigating through the model. So it's got all our views set up, and that's how we're going to sort of change what we're looking at. And we can then sort of reference and rename things through here if we want, set up some new views and they'll come into here, schedules, etc. They'll all come into here. So eventually these become quite long, and so we end up sort of minimizing some of the tabs that we might not be using. Otherwise you're just looking for views, all the time. With this 2019 release of Revit, they introduced these tabs that will appear at the top, which are the latest views that you've looked at as well. So that never used to be there. You'd have to go right through here all the time. But now we tend to have a few views listed along here until you fill it up and they disappear around the back. The bold one is what's opened over here. So another easy way to sort of see what view you're looking at. Now, if you do lose your project browser by accidentally closing it, or your properties, and you've got nothing, so now I can't navigate through my model. I've just deleted them, and I can't, if I select something, I can't change the properties of it. It's gone. So everyone will do that at some stage, and so that's to do with all these tabs along the top of the ribbon. So all these tabs change different sort of either disciplines or different things to do with what we're looking at. So if we go to the View tab along the top of the ribbon, anything to do with the view is there. So we've actually lost some control of our views, which is this user interface, or I have. So in the user interface at the end of that View tab, it's the Windows panel, you'll see that if I select that, my project browser and my properties were unticked. So if I tick those again, they appear back over there. Okay. And obviously, if you lose them in class, just sing out, I've lost them, and I'll show you where that is. You've lost them? Yeah.
How do I get back to the web?
So you've got, you've lost that whole bit, so that's this little rotate through, cycle through your views. So see that bottom thing there, cycle through. So I just keep clicking on that.
Oh,
sorry, yeah. I just keep clicking on that left arrow, the left one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Next one. Next one.
Okay.
So it just cycles through.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just this little icon here. If Ben just lost this ribbon, so we just minimise. You didn't really lose it. You just minimised it. It just cycles through, closing it off and bringing it up bigger. So what number are we up to? Number 8 now. 8 is just known as view tabs, which I mentioned as well. These little tabs of where your views are. So at the moment there's just a ground floor tab open. You'll have multiple as we start to go through different views.
Just tab.
View tab, yep. 9 is the navigation bar. So this little navigation bar over here is quite useful, more so in a 3D context. So at the top half there's a 2D wheel there that follows you around, and that just allows you to zoom, rewind and pan. But there's different commands on your mouse that will do the same things anyway, so I don't tend to use that little one. But in a 3D view, when we open a 3D view, I'll show you what that looks like then. It's got much more functionality, and it's got a little cube that you can actually click on that shows you where north is, etc. It'll keep orbiting your model around. It's got some quite good features. But the bottom half of that little control bar over there, or navigation bar, is all to do with zooming things. So this little command here, that first button is this zoom region, but you can obviously change the way they are. So you've got zooming to fit, etc. So if the model was sort of half outside our window, we could just say we wanted to get it all back into here, zoom out so that it all shrunk back in. That'd be zoom to fit. So, but again, there's a couple of shortcuts that I'll show you on the keyboard when we get the model up in a few minutes. So I don't usually use that too much, but it's not a bad tool in 3D. Number 10 is the view control bar. So that's right down here on the bottom of the window. Can you see where it starts? 1 is to 100, and then there's lots of little icons after that. That's the bar that we're referring to. View control bar. So it's sort of, I suppose, you think it's quite similar to this little quick access toolbar, because it's like a little string of icons. But the difference really is this one's got little tools that we can use in every view. So we want to save a file, we want to print a file, do some measuring, etc. Whereas this little view control bar is view specific. So it's only going to change the view that we've got opened. So if I change the scale on there to 1 is to 200, it's not changing the whole model and every view down in my project browser to that. It's not overriding the model. It's just to do with the view that we're working on. Okay? And the same with the rest of those icons. So the second one is the second icon there is and we'll go through these in a bit more detail and we'll use them a lot more, but the second one is the level of detail, which means that it'll show us, like inside the wall, it'll either show us a big solid wall, or it'll look like that there's some layers in the wall, or it'll give us a bit more detail if we're scaled up to 1:10, like nuts and bolts. If we've got coarse detail set, we wouldn't see that on the screen. It's still there, but it just hides it. The next icon is a little bit of a visual style icon, so how we want to look at that particular view. And so forth, they go through the sun path and the shadows, turning them on and off, etc. So we can actually, with the sun path and the shadows, we can actually locate our model that we're drawing to a specific city or town or coordinates. So longitude and latitude. So we know that, or we know the street address, etc. We can actually apply that to the model and show it where true north is, etc. So where north is, you know, we're saying north straight up here, but if on your boundary north was actually, you know, 20 degrees that way, we can input that information. So then when we turn the sun on, it's actually exactly what it will look like on the site. Very handy tool. When we start to design houses, etc., we want to obviously maximise winter sun coming in the north and those sorts of things. And you can actually do solar studies every 15 minutes of the day. It'll cycle through and show you what's happening inside your house in terms of where the sun's coming. So you might say, oh, actually, I didn't want the sun coming in there at that time of day. If it's middle of summer and you go, wow, pelting sun coming in the lounge room, that's really going to affect me watching the cricket. Okay? You know, so that's the sort of thing and the sort of detail you can get down to. If there's a tree on your site and you put a tree in your model that replicates that tree, it'll produce the shadows off that tree as well. So you can sort of say, that's blocking my solar panels. No, I'm not going to put them there, etc. So quite a useful sort of tool. So it's not just to show a pretty picture and say, look, I've got some shadowing on the building. It's actually, you know, we're looking at those as a design tool as well. The next couple of things are sort of about cropping your region, hiding things which we'll go through as we open up models. But that's all to do with view specific. So if I set up the shadows and turn them on, it's not going to turn the whole model's shadows on, it's just that view. So we might only want to see it on one particular view. Is that about it? Do we only have 10? Yeah, 10 things. So there's 10 bits of... The only other one that doesn't really talk about is this, what this space is, which I really refer to this as just your drawing area or your drawing window. So that's where we're going to be drawing. Any questions about that? That interface should probably, within about the first 4 weeks coming, will start to be a lot more familiar. And that's probably the hardest part about learning a new program. It's not using the program, it's where the hell is everything. You know, you can only do what you know. You know, it's a bit like when you learnt to drive a car. Does anyone remember that? How many things you had to think about? I only remember it because I'm sort of teaching someone at the moment, but you know, got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. And then once you've been doing it for a little while, you just don't realise that you're doing those things all the time. So, should we open a model and have a little look at some of those things now? If we close this one down, not write down, not Revit down, but we're just going to close this project down. Has everyone got just one tab there, or have you got multiple views? So we can, if we've just got one, we can just close it there. If we've got multiple views open, if I've opened 2, you can actually come up to this view tab and see this little area here. You can say close inactive views. So it'll close down all the views tabs other than the main one we've just selected on. And then we can just close that one down. And it'll probably ask us if we want to save this project. I'm going to say no. And we just head back to then the opening page. So if we had it closed right out of Revit, you know, and use this one, we'd have to start Revit again just to get back to here. So we don't need to do that. So what we're looking to look at here is this sample architectural project. So if we click on that once, it should open up. It'll take a few seconds to load up because it's a pretty big project, or maybe not. Oh, you blocked yours, yeah, so just hit Revit again. Oh no, so just this icon here. Yeah. And then just yeah, type in all there. So here you go. Easy to do. So if you remember this project last week, did you find it, Ben? Oh yeah. The sheet, the view that we're looking at is actually a sheet. It's the title sheet of the project. Yeah, just double click that first one there, yeah. And so that's what's in our view here. So you can see it says A001 title sheet. Now the A stands for architectural because when we open an architectural template, our views will be, or our sheets will start their numbers with an A. If it was a structural one, it would be an S before it. So some people will think that's like AO, size sheet or something, but it's just A for architectural. The sheet size comes from what we pick later. So this is a 2D sheet with some 3D images on it that have come from the model. So it's come from these views. They've set up a couple of 3D views, which are what some of these are put onto the sheet. And they've also set up a bit of a schedule here. So the schedules are all sort of part of the view tab. But if you have a look down that project browser, you can see there's nothing bold here. So it's not showing me where this title sheet's coming from. You know how I said the thing that's bold in your project browser is what's open? But if you scroll down a bit further, you'll see where the sheets are right down here. All the sheets, and you can see A001 is bold. Okay, so that's the sheet. But if we wanted to look at a specific view rather than the sheet, so views are just placed on the sheet at the end of the project to sort of issue the documents. Most of the time before we've got the sheets ready, we're actually working on the model through here. So if we double click on say level 1 in the floor plan, that's our level 1 view. So last week I sort of talked a little bit about what that's looking at. It's a camera view that's looking down on level 1 from about 1200 high. Okay, so if you imagine the room's sliced at 1200 high and the camera's just placed there looking from that 1200 high and stopping at that level 1 floor. So in this room it would be just stopping at the carpet. Anything above that we wouldn't see because we're looking down. And like I mentioned, the elevation views come from these little markers. So we've got north and south, etc. So they're camera views set up next to the building looking along from the outside. And our section views, which are down here as well, on the project browser, you can see there's some section views. This little icon here with the little blue head looking up and sliced through that way. So I think last week we looked at that first section and we were looking at the back of the kitchen. So just with this level 1 sort of view opened, if we we'll have a little look at how this works now, this mouse. If we want to scroll in and out of a view, it's just the scroll wheel. However, where our cursor is placed is going to be the center of the zoom. So if you want to look into the kitchen dining room next to that 101, hold your cursor right over that 101 and zoom in there. So you zoom in and out with your scroll wheel, it's going to come to that. So don't think, oh, my cursor's just out to the side and I want to look at that 101 and zoom in there, because it's going to shoot off to the side. Okay, so that's probably the first thing to just remember. Whatever you're looking at, that cursor is almost like your center of your eyes, zooming in and out. So it's pretty easy. So if I have zoomed off the page like that and I want to get it back across, I can pan across meaning I can drag the building across the page. And the pan is holding that scroll wheel down as a button. So if you hold that down, you'll see that it becomes this little cross, and you just slide, while it's down, slide it across, release it, click again over here and sort of pan it across. And obviously if it's sort of, you know, think, oh, it's scrolled out too big still, you can zoom it back and then pan it a bit, you know, so you know, get used to using both zooming in and out and panning as well. And the other thing, if we're zoomed, you know, right off the page like that, that little wheel, if we double click it as a button, it zooms it back into the center. So that's quite handy. When I mentioned before, you know, sometimes these commands are quite good, but I don't tend to use them. That's the one, because if it's disappeared, rather than sort of say zooming in and out, where's it gone? Just double click it and it'll come straight back in. And that's a zoom all, so it's fitting in there. So that's sort of 3 different things you can do with that scroll wheel. Okay, right clicking the mouse gives you a whole heap of little options depending on what sort of command you're in or what you've selected at the time. So for this, it's sort of saying, well, we want to cancel out of it, or we can click on one of these other zooms, etc. To select an object, let's zoom in and zoom in around the kitchen, and let's actually click on one of the chairs. Can you see a chair there next to the table? One of those round chairs, that's the top of a chair. If we select it and then change our project browser to our properties, or your properties might still be underneath, you'll see that by having the chair selected, the properties is now of the chair, not of the view. Okay, so the dining chair 3, okay, that's obviously what they've named, that's a family. So I talked a little bit about, or touched on that I'd talk about families later. The chair family is, I'll start to describe families a little bit tonight, but we'll go into it a bit more detail the next coming weeks. A chair is a family, and there's lots of different family types within chairs. So we've got this dining chair is a family type, but we might also, so chairs is the sort of family, but lots of different chair types within a chair family. So we might have a dining room chair, we might have a lounge chair, okay? They're both chair families, but they're different types of chairs. That makes sense. So I tend to describe it like my family name's Atkinson, and I've got 6 in my family, but we're all the same family name, but we're all different types of people. Okay, some are bigger, some are smaller, some do different things, you know, so, but we're still all Atkinson. So it's a bit like that. So when we go to bring a family in, there's a folder of chairs. So we might say, let's open up a chair family, and the type of chair we want is a desk chair or a dining chair. And then within those desk and dining room chairs, we might have different sizes, okay? And that's probably a little bit more applicable to windows. So think about a window. We're going to open up a window family, and we're going to open a sliding window. But the sliding window might have 10 different sizes of sliding windows. They all do the same thing, they're just different sizes, okay? And then a different family type would be an awning window with multiple sizes, or a fixed window with multiple sizes. So I will explain that a bit more in a bit more detail, but that's what this is sort of start to tell us a little bit about. So we're changing a family. If we change anything in here, it's changing this dining room chair 3 family in this instance, not all of the chairs in the project, whether they're dining chairs or lounge chairs, etc. So the other things that it's telling us by selecting that is, for this chair, for example, what level it's sitting at in the model. So we know it was there, but the level was level 1. Okay, so it's been placed at level 1. And if we wanted to have an offset, we could actually place it in there as well. So an offset, maybe not for a chair, we might not need it. So an offset would be if we want it to float off the floor a little bit. So we might even place it at level 1, and then we think, oh, we've actually just put something else underneath, a rug. So in actual fact, it would be 3 mil off the ground, because the rug under that, we don't want it to look like it goes through the rug, that sort of thing. If we were thinking of something like there's some plates and some wine bottles on that table, they would be placed on level 1 with an offset of whatever the table height is. So that's how it gets that level, right? So the offset is the value either higher or lower than the actual level, okay? The other types of things in this one is that there's images, comments, marks, and then there's a bit about phasing as well. So phasing is all to do with at what stage of the project it's going to be visible or come into the project, etc. So we might have a phase that's set up like stage 2 of the construction. So a lot of our drawings, if we've got chairs in there, we might say they're not visible until stage 2, and only some of our views would show stage 2 stuff. It's not that they're deleted from other views, just that they're not in that stage yet. When you get into Revit Intermediate, we do a whole project that's phased for construction in terms of a house that already exists. It's going to be some demolition activity happening, and then there's going to be a new thing. So there's different stages of construction or different phases put in there to replicate that on our sheets. So if we actually look at something different in here, we zoom out a little bit. So to deselect the chair or get that out of our properties or have it not selected, we can either hit escape, or you can just click the workspace that's got nothing in it. So that deselects it by selecting nothing. Let's go to a different view. So we're going to go down to our project browser, and let's actually go to a default 3D view. Now a default 3D view is not a view that's set up until we click a default 3D view with every project, and it's this little 3D with the brackets around it. But a quicker way to get to the default 3D view is to actually click that little 3D house icon on the quick access toolbar. So that will always go to, it doesn't appear in a project until you click this button. So that little bracketed 3D wouldn't be there until we've clicked this when we're first setting up a project in an architectural template. By clicking that, it creates that view, but it's a quick way to get back to this view as well. So this is a little 3D of the whole project. That's everything in that model, and including the little slice of land and soil that they've created as the terrain for it to sit on. Now, why I wanted to sort of show you this, so we can sort of investigate this mouse and some of the commands a bit more in 3D as well. So we've looked at the 2D stuff. That still happens with this as well. So we've still got the scroll wheel happening in and out. We've still got the pan happening. And we've still got the double click zooming all to fit. But this is where I was sort of saying this, in this 3D view or 3D control area. So what was that called over the side? What was number 9 called? Do you remember? Navigation bar. This one over here. This little icon here, see how I've got this command that follows me that's got quite a lot more function than the 2D one. 2D one had 3 buttons, whereas this one's got zoom, pan, rewind, look, up and down, walk, center, and orbit. It's got lots of commands there. If we close, if you can use that little icon sometimes, but you can close it down by just clicking on that little cross there and it disappears. I don't tend to use it a lot. I only grab it when I need it and close it down, because we can actually orbit around this model by using this little cube as well. So these are very specific orbits on this little cube. So can you see that on the cube, when I'm touching different surfaces and the corner, they go blue. So anything that sort of changes to blue means it'll actually orbit the model straight to that view. So if you hit the top, it'll go straight to the top view. If you hit one of the corners, it'll go to a little perspective corner view. Or the ring around the cube, which has the north, south, east and west, you can click those and you go straight to the west view in a 3D sort of orbited view. And to go to back to the default, you just hit the little home icon and it'll just come back to sort of almost where it started. Now, that's very specific in terms of views. So it's not going to sort of get you to exactly where you want sometimes. So the other way to orbit is by using the mouse. And what we do is we actually do two things. We hold that cursor down like we were, the scroll bar down like we were going to do a pan. So you'll see the pan come up as the first thing that you see. And the next thing is then we'll hit the shift button and you hold both of those down at the same time. So the icon on the screen will become this little circular orbit symbol. And when you sort of start to move your mouse by holding those two down, you can see that the model sort of starts to orbit around a little bit. Now I've just held my cursor sort of up to the side there, but if I wanted to orbit around something specific in the model, we can actually select something on the model and that will become our center of our axis that we're going to rotate around. So if we decided that we want to zoom in a little bit in the first instance on that, maybe that skylight, just to come in a little bit closer on that skylight on the roof if you can see it in your view, and then select the skylight or even the roof, and then try to hit your hand, so hold this scroll wheel down and shift, and then you'll see that it's actually turning around on, in mine, the skylight is the center axis. So that's quite handy for actually getting to sort of orbit where you want, rather than the model sort of flying off the window and think, oh, that's not what I wanted to see. So it takes a little while to get used to orbiting in 3D if you're not used to working in that space. So we've always got two hands working. One's near the keyboard, one's on the mouse, always. So if it's not hitting buttons, it's hitting escape on the keyboard, and our right hand, or maybe some of your left hand, is on the mouse, either right clicking, pushing buttons, zooming in and out. So it's just practicing those sort of things and getting used to them. Now, the other command that works quite well in a similar vein is by holding that scroll wheel down, and instead of hitting the shift for orbit, we hit the control, and that's actually our zoom in and out magnifying glass. You can see how that sort of starts to zoom in and out. So we can sort of come in right in without actually having to sort of scroll. So it's just a quick way to do it. So if we've got it hidden down and we're orbiting, we can change it quickly to a magnifying glass and then just zoom around a bit more. So the idea is sort of being able to get to certain, views quite quickly when we're looking at a 3D.
What was that? How did you do that last one?
So the same thing, hold your scroll wheel down as the button, and then it's just control, and then just move your mouse backwards and forwards to get it in and out.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone want me to go back over any of that stuff? Just keep practicing it as I'm talking as well. You don't have to sort of wait to be asked. Once we, like, and the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, this, like, what I always challenge people to do in this class is to break Revit. Break it. Like, if you can get something to happen that shouldn't happen, that means you're practicing. Like, that's what this is about. Don't ever think, I don't want to try it because I might break something or lose it or whatever. This is where you should be doing that. Like, this is the, you know, let's make it work and push it to its limits. No one's broken it yet. Some people have done some stuff that I've never seen happen before, which I always say is really good. And that really comes from when I was a student. I think I told you last week, computers weren't what I learnt because they weren't really around when I finished, you know, when I went through school, there was 2 computers in the whole school sort of thing. It wasn't my natural thing. And I got into this industry because I could draw, you know, and now that disappeared. So I don't even draw now. You know, sometimes I draw stuff for my daughter and she tells me it's terrible. Draw something better. But, you know, so my whole why I got into it's completely changed to, you know, what attracted me in the first place. But when I was at uni doing one of my first degrees that had a lot of computers, one of the girls that I became friends with and studied a lot with, she was fantastic at any program, anything that was just coming out. She knew how to use everything. I said to her one day, how the hell do you know so much about programs? How do you learn this stuff? We don't learn this stuff at uni. Where are you getting all this information? She said, when I get a program, I just click everything. I was like, what? She said, just click everything. What are you going to do? You're not going to break it. And that was the first time I was like, oh yeah, because I was always a bit scared of losing stuff or, oh, I don't want to change that. What if I can't get it back? And from then on, like I just went, oh yeah, let's just go for it. And that's why I always tell my students, well, it was a really good thing to, that's how you learn and this is the environment for doing it. So don't worry about, oh, I'm going to lose it. You don't want to you want to make the mistakes here, not when you get to work and use it, you know, so this is where you can break things, etc. There's always a back arrow as well. I don't know whether you saw that up in the quick access toolbar. Once we start doing commands, you can actually go backwards and forwards. So if you do lose something or you press something, oh, I didn't like that, just go back a few steps and you'll get there. Okay, it's very rare that you'll actually lose too much of your work. So try to click everything. I always say, click everything and you'll figure it out. The other really good resource that Revit has is up here as a little question mark. This is like their encyclopedia for Revit 2019 or whatever release you're using. So they update it every year. So if you click that little question mark, it takes you to the internet, which is just a Revit knowledge site. And in this here, it just talks about Revit 2019. There's little tutorials and little bits and pieces, but in the keyword search, there's pretty well, you know, anything that you want to know. So if you're thinking, oh, I can't do something, you click it in, you usually find there'll be a little tutorial or something that'll show you about a command, and it's massive. So you should be able to find everything in there. And that's all to do with, you know, what's happening here. So there's a getting started, there's lots of little videos, beginners workflow, etc. So it talks about stuff and about Revit and, you know, all those sort of things. So obviously, you know, if you're in class, feel free to ask me anything about it. If I can't help you, I'll, you know, find it. But if you're at home and you're playing around, this is where you'll sort of build on your knowledge as well. There's heaps of stuff there. The other good place to go while we're on the internet is there's actually a site called Revit City, and it's been around for a long time, and the website sort of reflects that. Revit City, when you have a look, it's pretty ordinary website. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a new type of look of a website, but it basically has forums and things, and you can sign up for it. It's free, and once you've signed up or you've logged in, you can actually download models and things or families that people have created. It's probably, you know, one of those places that if you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm doing this job and I need a specific, I don't know, fireplace or gas heater or something, and you go, oh, I can't find that family. Someone's usually made one on here that's sharing it. Just have to be a bit careful with some of the models on here because it's a free site that anyone in the world's got access to. So often there's people that of all levels that share models. So you might not get the best version of a family that you could get by searching through, but there's some good ones on there. So it just depends on what you want to use it as. Sometimes you'll get one and go, that doesn't look that great, delete it, and try another one, okay? But the reason I sort of pointed you to this now is there's a heap of forums there. So often people, even in the workplace, if they're all stuck at work and they say, oh, how do we do such and such, or we're working on this project, we haven't collaborated properly, what have we missed? They might actually start posting stuff on the forum, and there's people around the world that will get on and say, yeah, we did that, this was our workflow, or sometimes people link models or other bits from the internet, so just try this link, this is what we used, etc. So it's a whole community around the world, lots of people. Everyone starts at a level, and everyone on this has done it before, tried it, didn't work. So have a little look on that. There's heaps of stuff there. The other good site too, if what we're talking about, is there's one called BIM Object. So BIM Object is a really good place to download families and specifically sort of manufactured sort of goods, whether it's going to be a fridge that you want or an oven or whatever. And so you just have to, again, you've got to sign up for it, it's free. And then you can search for specific Revit models within there. So they've got lots of different BIM contents, whether it's ArchiCAD or whatever. So you just go, right, I just want the Revit stuff, and then search through the Revit stuff. If it's, then you say Smeg is the brand that I'm looking for, or you might put something more specific like a brand type of Smeg or something like that, and then you can download it. So I used this the other night. I'm doing a project at the moment, and I needed a Samsung air conditioning outdoor bit of air conditioning. What's that called? Compressor. And so I had a small one, but this project wanted a slightly bigger one, which I didn't have. So I was like, I need to just show where that is located on the site. So I didn't need it to be the exact one, but I found pretty close to it, which was the right sizes and everything, and I could put that on the project, say this is the location of the compressor, so they know this is where it's going to go on site, and the services will do the rest. So yeah, so there's a couple of three little websites that will be quite useful throughout.
So what was that second one called? BIM Object.
BIM Object was the third one. Yeah, first one was the Revit content question mark, but you can just Google that anywhere. Revit content, Revit knowledge, I think it's called. The second one was Revit City, and the third one BIM Object. Start my recording. We'll use this model as a bit of a tool again, just to sort of go through some stuff and see how we can look at different views, etc. So if we start to look down the project browser, we've already spoken, that there's lots of different views set up in here. But more specifically, I want to just have a bit of a look at the elevations. The east elevation, north elevation, south and west all have a slightly different look to them compared to that 3D view that we're looking at. See how that one's all in colour? The 3D view is a bit more realistic, whereas your elevations a bit more black and white, but then there's a little bit of a gradient in the background. So all this sort of stuff comes from the view control bar. So remember right down the bottom of a view, we had that 1:100 scale and then we had a couple of icons. Well, the second one, the little cube, is the visual style. So the visual style that's been set up or selected for the elevations is the hidden line style. But it's also, the hidden line style has had some graphic display options changed. So see how you've got quite a few different styles of view, and then at the top there's a graphic display option. So if it's in hidden line and we go graphic display, you get this little dialog box that comes up and it says the style to start with, and then it actually sort of looks at lots of different categories there. The background category is what they've added to this style. So by default, the hidden line wouldn't have this gradient. It would actually have none. Okay, so if we change it to none, say apply, you can see that that gradient just disappears out of the background. Now the 3D view, we'll do it in this eastern elevation, has a consistent, what they call a consistent colour view applied. So we could actually apply that to this eastern elevation, consistent colour, and there's those colours coming up. And if we change it to a realistic view, it'll think about it for a minute and it'll start to sort of change the look of some of the materials. And you can see the big difference there is the trees. Like they look way more realistic than when we were just in that consistent colour or even in that hidden line view. Okay, so the difference in those appearances there are the realistic has actually got some sort of rendering properties applied to it. So when we look at materials for every object or every part of the model, some of the objects have a basic material applied to them. So if it's concrete, it'll have, you know, a specific colour applied to it. But if we wanted to then add to that and make it quite specific, we can actually put in some actual samples of the real material, which is more that realistic rendered appearance. So that sort of starts to come into play when you start to sort of make it more of a visual thing for the client. So you're actually sort of trying to, you know, get their proposal right in terms of the colours of the house. You need to show council, and it's about trying to get those really accurate and tell a picture by just showing the model, rather than have to have an elevation with, you know, 1,000 words describing what the colour's going to be, and then someone's got to look those colours up, etc. We can actually show what it's going to look like. So quite a handy sort of tool. So depending on, you know, what view you want, you can get a pretty good look out of in the box sort of thing. So the trees, etc. You don't have to change too much, but there'll be certain stages where you'll go, right, this is the house I'm doing. The material that it's given me, the brick, is just a brown brick. We're actually going to use you know, monument or a grey or, you know, something that's specific. Then you've got to sort of chase that material up and apply it to the material in that particular model. So most of the time, with a drawing of at this stage, we would just usually use that hidden line style. We don't have to have all the colours applied, etc. Because when we're starting to build a model, the colours are irrelevant until we get to the development sort of stage. So the first point of call for us is really, let's actually try to interpret what the client wants and get the height rights and the volume rights and the room spaces right. So the colour doesn't really matter, you know, so we don't have to actually worry about that till later, okay? So a lot of people sort of tend to sort of think, oh, I'm in this 3D Pro, I need to have it all looking colourful. Well, that comes a bit later. Yes, we will have the right colours on it, but we don't need to actually show that while we're working, because it just gets in the way of what we're trying to do. So some of the things that we'll look at in these elevations are what maybe has been hidden and what's shown. So if we look at maybe the northern elevation, in the northern elevation, when we're trying to show someone an elevation, we're trying to show what the building looks like, not what's in front of the building. And in the northern elevation, because we've done it, like they've obviously modelled up this whole site, in the northern elevation, there's actually between the house and the camera view, there's a tree. So if we look at that northern elevation there, there's actually a tree sort of sitting somewhere around here on the site. Now that's been hidden in this view because the elevation is about, we want to see what the house looks like, not that the house has got a tree in front of it. So if you want to reveal hidden items in this view, the little quick access, the view control bar down the bottom has a little icon that's got a little light bulb. Can everyone see that one? And it's called Reveal Hidden Elements. So click on that and you'll see anything that's been hidden in this view is now showing, but it's with a pink outline. So you can see that tree I was talking about. It looks like it's floating because the contours are coming up, in the foreground. But that's been hidden. So to reveal a hidden item or to turn an item back on, what we've got to do is select that tree when it's pink and then come up to our modify panel and hit unhide elements. And it's now lost its pink outline, meaning it's now not revealed. So if we hit the light bulb again, you'll notice that now the tree is back there unhidden. So to hide an element, let's hide the tree again. It's about sort of selecting the tree, and we've got a couple of ways we can do things. Now if I'm in a view and I think I just need to get that out of the way temporarily, but I'm going to turn it back on, it's not hitting delete. Delete will definitely get rid of it, but delete's also going to get rid of it from that site plan that we wanted it on, the landscaping plan, the 3D overall view. So remember, we're always working on a model, and anything we're going to take out of it is disappearing from all these other views that we want to show. So the way that we hide objects temporarily is to use the little sunglasses, I call it sunglasses icon, or the glasses icon that's just to the left of that light bulb icon down the bottom. So if you hit that little icon, you'll see that it says isolate category, hide category, isolate element, or hide element. So we want to hide the element, and that just hides that one tree. So the element is one tree. The category would be all the trees. Okay? So if we just do a back arrow and then click on that tree again and have a look at the hide category, you'll notice that all those other trees disappear as well. So that's the difference between a category and an element. If we've selected something and we want to just hide that, it's just that element. But if we've selected something, it could be the chairs that were in that dining room, we say we want to hide all of them, it's hiding by category. A category is that they're all the same family. Now notice when we do this hide, we get this this cyan coloured border around it, that pale blue border around the outside. So it's actually saying something is temporarily hidden. Now to change that into a permanent hidden view, we can click on the little sunglasses icon again and say apply, hide, isolate to view. So it takes that away and it's now permanently hidden. So to get those items back, it's the little light bulb, reveal hidden items, and then you can see those are pink. They've been permanently hidden in the view. So the difference between temporarily hiding, when we've got the blue outline, and permanently hiding, getting rid of the blue outline, applying it to the view, is that the temporary one is just if we're working through and then we're going to turn it back on. So we could actually just, reveal the elements quite quickly. Permanently hiding them is obviously something that we're going to say, that's what I want the view to look like all the time. Okay. Now, when we look at all those sort of things as well, let's actually click on the trees and unhide category again by hitting that button. And so the trees have come back. If we try the other options there, isolate category, the isolate category, that's the only thing is going to be seen is the trees. It's temporarily hiding the rest of the model. Other than like where you're obviously just doing it to trees, where do you think that temporarily isolating an object might come in handy when you're working through a model? Any guesses? If we look back at the default 3D view and we orbit around a little bit, just have a look. What about if I sort of thought, I just want to actually have a look at this floor up here. So if I click on the little veranda floor there and isolate the category, I can actually check out what's happening with that floor without anything around it. And then if I'm orbiting around, you can see all the different floor types there, because they're all floors. We've isolated the category. So I might actually be thinking, did I actually get my penetration in the kitchen in the right spot? But I can't see it now because there's all windows and that sort of thing. Have I set the levels down to the right heights? So it's just a way of actually sort of temporarily getting rid of things that might be in your way. So while we're modelling, we still need to be able to look at parts of the model and get rid of other things temporarily. So to get back the rest of it back, we're just going to reset temporary hide on the little icon tool. Now, one of the things that's very handy in Revit that I wouldn't expect you to get straight away, but I'll start introducing them, are what's called shortcuts or hotkeys. So Revit shortcuts are quite a handy thing because it's just a couple of commands, usually like a couple of taps on the keyboard and usually different letters, that'll do all these things for us. So I have about 20 commands that I tend to use all the time in my day-to-day work role when I'm drafting, designing, using Revit. There's 20 commands that come to my mind really quickly that mean I don't have to press buttons or, those sorts of things. And the more you work in an office, the more, the better speed you'll get when you use shortcuts, because it's these things that will happen much quicker rather than trying to remember where to click to do things. And you'll build on that 20 to 40, 50 the more often you work. My brain's not that big, so 20 is about my capacity. If I get any more than 20 in there, I really just lose the first couple. What we were just doing back in that east elevation or even that north elevation has shortcuts as well. So if I've got this temporary hide here and I wanted to get that back, instead of going down to the little sunglasses tool and hitting reset that, I could actually type in HR and it all comes back. HR is reveal temporarily hidden items. So you don't have to remember all these straight away, but I will, when I start to use them a bit in class, I'll say that was this and that was that, and etc. So to temporarily hide something now, like this tree, we'll select the tree. HH is the shortcut that just hides that element temporarily. So you see the blue line come back up. And then to get it back, HR. So much quicker when I'm sort of working through a model and I think I just need to, get rid of that, something temporary to see what's behind it. It might be the roof's in the way and I need to see what's behind there. HH hides that. Okay, and then I might be sort of thinking, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot I put that truss in there. HR back on. Okay, so HH, HR will be your first two that you might use a little bit. The other one that's quite handy that allows you to navigate through your model a little bit is if I've selected, say, this tree, but now I want to select all of the trees, what we do is when we want to multi-select things, we click on one item, and then if I wanted to select just one other tree, what I've got to do to pick up both trees, have them both selected, because if I just click on another one, deselects the first object and selects the second. If we want multiple selections, while something is selected, if we hold shift down or control down, you'll notice, so both of them do two different things. One has a minus symbol and one has a plus symbol next to the cursor. So the shift is a minus, the control is a plus. So while you hold the control down and select another tree or another object, it could be something different, it means that you've then starting to select multiple objects and you can keep it going. But if it was just all the trees that you wanted, another shortcut might be SA. So you've selected one tree, and if you say SA, it will actually then select all of those same tree types in a project. This one's got different trees in it, so it won't work to this particular bit. But that's quite handy with maybe a door in a project. You might click on one door and you say, actually, I want to change all these door types to something different. SA will select all. So I'm only really introducing some of this stuff because it's all about just looking at controlling views and what we're seeing on views. And remember, we're looking at the one model and we're changing things in that model even though we're just working on a view. So we're either hiding things for the view or we're looking to move or add things in the model. Another good tool in terms of modeling is to actually be able to change our view and to actually have multiple windows open. So we can actually go to the View tab and we can actually say Tile Views. So all of the views that we've got open will actually be tiled on our screen. And then to centralize what's happening in each of these now windows, we can just do that double click of the scroll wheel and it'll put all these things in the middle of their, so it zooms them all into the middle of their unique window. And why I sort of tend to show you this is you probably wouldn't work with all of those views tiled on your screen, but you might work with 2 or 3. And in an office we tend to have at least 2 screens, so we can drag views onto other screens as well and have things tiled on views. But we might tend to be working on a generic 3D and then maybe a floor plan or something as well, so we can see what is going to be reflected on the visual appearance of the outside of that model, if any. We might be looking not to change the outside and we're just checking that it's not affecting anything that we've done. But why I tend to...
Jason, how did you get that view? How did you get the tile view?
Yep, so View tab, and then Tile Views in the window panel at the end. Yep. So you have to have a couple of view tabs open because that's the ones that it's going to select tile. But why I wanted to show you this is because what I've sort of been trying to explain really is part of the function of this view control bar that was down the bottom here. Notice now each one of these views has its own view control bar. So that's what it's referring to. Anything on this button is for this. That's why it's not still one that is overriding all of those views. Okay. Everything else though is overriding all of those views, but they've all got their own view control bar. So when we were hiding those trees in that view, it was only just happening to that north elevation that we were doing it to. It wasn't automatically hiding them in these other views. Okay. So it's all about sort of creating a view that we want. This is the model, but this is what I want to see on this view, or the graphics, you know, all came from that as well. I want to apply some colours here, or a realistic view, or put that gradient background, but it's not going to apply it to every view that automatically. If we want to apply it to every view, we can set up what's known as a view template. And a view template is saving settings from a view and calling it elevation view template. And then when I open my other elevation, I can just tick a box that says apply the elevation view template that I ticked, and it will have all those same things hidden and ticked and color or whatever in that template. So there's a way that we can actually say, I don't want to have to do it 4 times. This is the view that I want. Maybe there's a couple of other things hidden, but the base of that template is going to be able to be applied. So there's ways to apply it right through the model as well. The other thing that we can look at while we've got these this view window open is the we can actually tab views. So that tab just refers to back to all the top, so it takes it through the tab view. And I mentioned before, if we want to get rid of all these tabbed views, we can actually then say close inactive views, which is everything other than this front view here, and it will actually close down all those other views on the main window. So they're still obviously over here, we haven't deleted them, it's just got rid of them from up here. So we do that probably because we might want to say just be looking at 2 or 3 views and tile them, so we don't have multiple. So you close inactive, just open the couple that you want. So let's actually just open the east elevation, the level 1 floor plan, and maybe the default 3D view, and then tile views, and then we've just got those 3 there. So just a way of sort of, you know, working, different way of working, or different seeing different things in the same, on the same screen.
Can you change the location of each one? So if you want like the 3D view of the bigger.
Is there a shortcut for that? Let me think about that. I haven't done that for a while. I think you can. Definitely can. Can't remember the shortcut. Told you I only remember 20.
Oh yeah, you click tile views again. And it switches them around.
Oh, just keep, that's it. Keeps rotating them. No?
No. Worked once.
Oh, it works the first time, and then if you click on a view, it actually, so whatever view you, click on a view, and then it'll keep rotating them. I haven't done it that way before. Yeah. So, again, navigation, depending on where our cursor is where we're going to be, you know, zooming on each particular window, etc. So if I select the east elevation in my case, and then I want to go down to my graphic display options, so at the moment it's still hidden line, but I'll hit the graphic display. I might turn that background back on and say gradient again and apply. There's my gradient come back up. But some of the other things in that model display that are quite interesting is the shadows. So this is about how the shadows are cast. So whether it's full shadows or just ambient shadows, which is a little bit softer. You don't have to worry about too much about sketchy lines. That just changes it to make it look a bit like a hand sketch. If you want to pretend you can draw, enable it and then just add a bit of jitter and some extension lines. So you can see, actually I'll make it a bit more. So you can see it sort of makes it look a bit sketchy. So you might sort of start with that sketchy line when you're sort of showing a client something that's not quite finished. You know, you say this is the idea that we've got, so they don't get too bogged down in sort of detail at that stage. One of the other things though is the lighting. So the lighting is where that sun path and the direction and the location we set up. So you can sort of see if we go into this lighting area, this is to do with artificial lights. If we put some lights in there, how we're going to control those as well as the sun light. So the in-session lighting session there actually gives us the a couple of options for the solar study and where we're going to be. So if you go to the, say, still solar study option, this is where you can start to set up the location. So you can go in there and find the right location, type in where you want, or use the search option. At the moment it's got Canberra, but in the internet mapping service you can go to default city list, and then it'll bring through basically all those default cities there. So Adelaide's in there, wherever you want. So just remember when you first, if you are thinking, oh, I might just turn some shadows and that on, it'll always be set up to like an American place, so it's going to be completely wrong. So that's why it's quite important to know where that is in the start. So you can say, let's just change it to Adelaide, at least you're pretty close. And if you type in A, it'll find all the A's. You don't have to sort of scroll right through there. If you type in AD, it should go to Adelaide, being the second one there. Say OK. So then it allows you to sort of, you've got that location in there. You can go to summer or winter solstice there as well, which gives you the worst case and the best case scenario for each of those months, I suppose. And then the other one, ground plane at level, that's where the sun will finish hitting the ground. So I always try to set up a level on my models that will be either the paving level or where the backyard or the actual ground level. So often it takes it as level 1 by default. So if you haven't got a level there, so it'll stop the shadows a bit short and look a bit wrong if your level's quite a fair way from your ground. So setting up that level will then put another level in that box to pick. So the other sort of things that you can then do is once we say apply and OK, it's changed the shadows to be Adelaide. And then in the quick access toolbar, so I'm just looking at my east elevation here. If I turn the shadows on or off, it's not really showing me much there because of obviously where it's located now. The little sun icon, which is sun path on or off, that's just going to show you whereabouts the sun angles are. But the sun settings option, again, brings you back to this location. So you can actually then sort of do a solar study for maybe single day. And in the single day, this is when you can then change the time that you want it to start and the time that you want it to finish. How many frames? So I could say sunrise to sunset, and actually every 15 minutes. So it's going to be 42 frames right along. And then once we've actually got that, we could save it, the settings, etc. We might say, actually, I want to do it in winter solstice. So we're looking at that. Sunrise to sunset every 15 minutes, 58 there, apply and OK. So when you do that, and you go back into your settings, what tends to happen is then you can actually do a little solar study of press a play, and it'll actually, that's what I said, it'll play you through that. This view is not going to give it to us because we're there's not much sun happening in that view anyway, just the way it is. But that's just a bit of background where that is, because it's quite an interesting part of the program, quite a clever thing to be able to do. Saves us a lot of time and a lot of guesswork. As I mentioned, I'm working on a project at the moment, and I did some solar studies for, like, actually set up a camera inside the lounge room, and I wanted to be able to see the best place for the windows to get the maximum winter sun in and no sun in the summer. And there was a couple of quite big trees in the neighbour's property that I located and replicated in Revit, so then I could actually see through the day if I had a window there, was it actually even getting the sun because of the trees? And so originally I had a couple of windows on that northern side, but one of them I've deleted now because once I worked out the exact location of the trees, it actually didn't work because they were in full shade anyway. So I was like, well, in winter, that's just going to be heat loss that I don't want because it's not got the solar gain. So it's quite an easy way for me to actually see it. And then when I went to site and actually looked at a few different times on the day, I was like, wow, that window where it was would have been in full shade. So it sort of reminded me how good the program was because I already knew that. So, you know, and windows cost money, you know, to put in a building. You know, every time you put a window in, it's a bit more work and a bit more cost, etc. So I saved the client some money by taking that out, even though theoretically, I know, you know, I wanted to put more windows on the north, but it actually wasn't really getting the north because it was shaded. So, so it's, yeah, it's quite a good tool to know how to use. So any questions about sort of some of those views and what we're sort of starting to look at and understand? Just keep singing questions out as we go. Let's turn off the east elevation now, and I'll turn the 3D model off, and we'll just go to this level 1. Did I turn that one off? Now, one of the interesting ways to navigate through your views as well is if we've just got a floor plan. Has everyone got level 1 up? Any view symbol that's got a blue head. So see this section marker's got a blue head, and if I hover over this north elevation marker, you can see it's actually got a bit of a blue hue over the front of it. Everyone see it turns a bit blue. Anything that's blue means if I double click on it, it will go to that view. So rather than if I said I wanted to go to this section 1 view here, try to find where that is down in here, I can actually just double click on that head and it's just gone to that view. So that's quite handy when you're in, like when you're looking at sections, because you might end up with like 5 or 6 sections across your building, and to actually remember which one it was called in here might take you a few clicks on those. So being able to just click on it, now I know it was the building section 1 because it's bold there, but that's showing me a cut through of that building across. Now, within this section view, there's some other views that have been created. Can everyone see that number 3A104? So that little view there is this little dashed line, which is known as a call out. So they've put this little new view that's going to show this wall detail at a bigger scale. So if I double click on that blue head, because it's blue, it'll actually show me that wall detail, and now it's at 1:20. So you can see it's zoomed in and it's got a lot more detail there. And then within there, there's another 3 details, which is showing me even more detail of what's happening here. So So if we double clicked on this top one, there's the wall to roof intersection with a lot more detail in it. The scale's gone right up to 1:10. So the closer that scale gets to 1:1, so everyone understand 1:1 means realistic size. There's no proportion there. It's, you know, if I was going to draw a house up at 1:1, I'd need a screen the size, to view the whole floor plan, I'd need a screen the size of the house. 1:1. Okay, so that's why we have scale, so we can actually get it onto sizes of paper as well, reduce it down. But obviously, the larger the number gets, the smaller the drawing. We're trying to shrink it down to fit on smaller size sheets, or we've got something that's really big that we need to fit on a decent size sheet. So usually site plans, which is the overall of a site, will be at about 1:200, maybe a bit greater, like 1:500 if it's an acreage type site that we're trying to see the whole site. And sometimes we need to go a bit bigger depending on how big the block is. But in a residential sense, it'll be 1:500 for most large properties, and like a normal residential block, you know, up to sort of probably 1,000, 1,500 square metre block, you do it 1:200, and that will fit on your A3 sheet with some dimensions and your boundary and that sort of stuff on it. Floor plans come to 1:100, so we're not trying to fit the whole site on, it's just the house, which is just a proportion of that site. And then elevations usually 1:100 as well. Sections we tend to show a little bit bigger, so they come to 1:50. And then from that section drawing, it'll usually then start to be the details, which will get greater and greater detail depending on what we're trying to show. So you can go right up to 1:1 if you need to, but most of the time it'll be up to about 1:10 would be probably the biggest drawing, or the closest to real life that you'd get. For houses I'm talking, and buildings. If you're working on scale and you're showing drawings for what would it be, like industrial design sort of objects, watches and things like that, because they're only a small object, they'll do 1:1 all the time, because they'll actually go the opposite way around and even get it, you know, much larger. So their scale will go the other way because they want to actually show it bigger than what it is in real life. So hopefully that just gives you a bit of an idea of scale. One of the other things you might have noticed with some of these views that we looked at, for example, this view's got this roof line dash line through it. Can everyone see that dash line that says roof line 6,000 or 6 meters? If we went back to the typical wall section, you can see the whole wall is showing roof line, level 2, ceiling, level 1, living room and foundation. So they're all our levels of in the building. And levels are set up by us as we started building because we're referencing something. And usually like the first 0 line will be something referenced on the site. So a 0 might be the top of the curb out the front of the building if there's nothing there. Blank site, top of the curb's not going to change, it's going to stay. Or if it does change, it needs to be replaced afterwards, you know, if there's something being cut out or whatever. So we'd say the top of the curb would give us a temporary benching level, and then we might work either that being 0 and then the building is, you know, 50 higher than that or whatever it is. So we've got some reference on site. So it's just about us working out what levels we're creating in the building then to say this height is our finished floor level. So whether it says it's 100 or it's 50 or it's 0, it's just a starting point, and everything else can come from that. So then it's the ceiling height, and then if it's got a roof height, or if it's got a second level, it'll be the next floor level and the next ceiling height, and they just go and go and go. So we're sort of it's going to be different for every build, because we're either going to be working on 2, 3 story, 1 story, 2.4 ceiling, 2.7, 3 metre ceilings, you know, so we're setting them up per project. So when we first come into an elevation view for a project, we get, in the default template, we just get two views, level views set up. So we have a level 1 and a ground level by default in an architectural template. And it's up to us. Next week when we come in, that's what we'll do. We'll actually set up some levels and start to actually be doing some drawing. So you can see they're referenced in all the different views there. So we've got that roof line, level 2, ceiling, level 1. So the other thing that they're very useful for is to then use as references throughout the building. So remember when I clicked on the dining room chair, and it's some of the information about that was that it was at level 1, and then I said if I wanted to offset that, it would be referenced from level 1. The offset would either be marked plus or minus. So sometimes that's what we're using our levels for. If we have something on a building that needs to be a certain height, we might set up a level for that particular height, but we might not show it on all the plans. Okay. So it might be that there's a parapet or something at that's the top part of the building, and we might set up that so we can actually get our parapet to that height, but it might not be used through the rest of the building. It's obviously just one part of the building. So everyone remembered last week when I talked about the 3D views and how they were created, and then the rendering views were slightly different? Not really. So to set up all these 3D views that were here, so over in the project browser we've got the category is 3D views, and we've got approach, from yard, kitchen, living, section, solar analysis, and then the default one. So that default one's the one that we're clicking when we hit that 3D icon, but the other ones are set up from actually placing a camera. So let's set up a new one so you can sort of see how that works. So if we go back to our level 1 floor plan, and we want to set up a new camera in let's make it in the kitchen dining room. And we're going to set it up, if you zoom in a bit, let's set it up sort of above this 105, which is the door tag for this door here. Let's set it up from this top corner of the kitchen dining and look back over to the back corner of that table. So we're going to look across to that other corner. So to set up a new 3D view, or the camera view, up in the quick access toolbar, the little 3D house icon has a little drop down arrow next to it. If you click on that arrow, you can see it's got three little options: default 3D view, which is the icon that's showing at the moment, camera, and then the walkthrough. We're going to do the camera view. So if you click on the camera, there's my 30-minute save reminder, which I'm going to cancel out of. You'll notice that there's a little camera icon now following your cursor around. So what we want to do is just click once somewhere in this little area here, just once, and drag your cursor away from the camera. So the once places the camera. Drag the cursor out and you'll see three lines starting to come out. Now, where we're going to finish placing is going to be the end of the camera view. So we want to take it outside the building, otherwise it'll look like the inside just disappears. Okay, so take it right through the outside of the wall, and the two outer blue lines are sort of like the depth or the peripheral vision, if you like, of that camera. So if you can sort of have that so that you know that you're getting what you want in the view. Usually I suggest trying to get both corners of the end of the building in as you do it, so that you can actually see where that end wall finishes. So I'm going to sort of make mine about there, and then just click once to finish, and it will take you to that 3D view that you've created. So did everyone get a view similar to mine? Now, one of the things that you've done is you've obviously placed a camera and dragged it through to to end where you wanted it, but so we can sort of see outside, we've got a bit of contour coming down, we can see that column, some bar stools, there's the kitchen, bench, the dining table, etc. But what it's done in your 3D views now is place this new 3D view 1. And the reason it's called 3D view 1 is that's what they all started with being called, but these ones have been renamed something that's a bit more descriptive. The next view that we place, if we don't change that one, will become 3D view 2, 3D view 3, 3D. So you can imagine trying to navigate your way through there to find the kitchen view if it's called 3D view 4. You know, you don't know which one. So to change that one, no worries there. To change that one, right click on that 3D view 1 and rename. So right click on that 3D view 1 and rename. And we're going to call it kitchen dining. And then you just click to make that the name. Now with this new view in your window, let's change the visual style to realistic. And once you've got it realistic, let's turn the shadows on. So down in the, with the little, it's got a little moon with a red cross. If you click on shadows on, you'll see that now we've got this sunlight streaming into that kitchen. Now if you select the outer box of that view, you'll see that you get these little blue grips, 4 little blue grips around the outside. This allows us to crop the view. So it's actually sort of starting to manipulate how much we're seeing of the view, stretching that camera view up and down. But while that box is selected, what we can actually do is go to the properties of that view. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some things in the camera setting of this view. So 2 of the things that I'm sort of looking at is that we've got eye elevation and target level. So that's basically by default it's been set up that it was about the height of my eyes, 1750, and the elevation level or the target level was actually straight on. So if we want to change that view to sort of be lower and up or higher and down, it's just about manipulating these numbers. So if you change it now, you'll see your view change. So it's a different way to change the camera after you've placed it in. And if you've dropped your camera a bit too short or you're getting something in the distance that you don't want, it's the far clipping offset. So where I dropped my camera, the second click when I was putting the camera, mine was at 31 metres, just over 31 metres away from where the camera was placed. But if I said, I know that building's only, 15 long, and I wanted just to get to the end, I could change it to, 15. I could just change that input in here. Makes sense? So this gives us the ability to obviously look inside our model quite easily in each room. Again, when I was talking a bit about that solar study before, this is the type of thing I set up so I could see, and then right through the day as the sun was coming through, this is where I wanted to see what was happening. So I wanted minimal sun in that lounge room in the summer. I didn't want to get all the sun in there, and then in the winter as much as possible. And obviously then, the next point is showing the client, this is what, you know, this is the part, this is what you'll see, you know, when you look in your model, etc. So when you get sort of views like this set up, this is where in your realistic sort of views in the graphics display, the background option can be quite handy. So at the moment there's none in the background, but we can change it to sky or gradient. But can you see image? So what image allows you to do is actually go onto site and take a photo of what the real site looks like from that angle. If you say, right, I'm going to set up a background that looks like their backyard, or if they're building on, you know, down the bay or something, stand at the front of the site, click, and then camera view in the kitchen looking out their front window, you choose image, click on where your image is on your computer, it will actually drop that image into the background of that there. So your client gets to sort of see, that's exactly the view we wanted, you know, so it's quite photorealistic then. So again, if you were doing like a proposal for council and they were sort of a bit worried about the streetscape or something, you could stand at the front of the block, take a photo with, you know, the neighbour's property in, and then set up your camera of your model at the same spot that you took the photo, drop it in as the background. So anything behind your model, next door neighbours, etc., anywhere your model's not, it's going to see exactly what was in that photo around. So you get a bit of an idea of colour to streetscape, to the exact height of the trees in the background, those sorts of things. Now, if we go back to our default 3D view, I want to show you in this sort of default 3D view how we can almost look inside this building without setting up a camera view. So if I sort of wanted to just sort of crop half of this building off because I want to look at some of those without doing a section, I can set what's known up as a section box. And with this view, it's actually there's already a section box that's actually hidden. Someone's already put the section box on, but they've hidden it. So if you reveal hidden items in this, you'll see a big rectangle around the building, and we want to unhide that element and then turn the little icon off. So this is known as a section box, which is a little box around the whole model. And what you'll notice is that it's got all these little grips around it. So in a particular view, if I wanted to slide, let's do it from this side, slide this back in through the building, you can see it's chopped off part of the building. So it gives me the ability to sort of start to look inside certain rooms. If I say, oh, actually I need to go a bit further, I can actually, you know, orbit that around and find that little blue grip and go in a bit further into this room, a bit more, and start to actually look in here and here, etc. There's the stairs I can start to see, so I might say, actually I really want to check out what's happening with those stairs. And then we can sort of start to see what's happening, you know, a bit closer in the model. So rather, you know, sometimes we need to sort of hide things, but it's easier to make it like almost a slice. And to turn those section boxes off, if you go back into just deselect anything that you've selected in that view, you'll see in the properties of that view, there's a tick box. There's a category called section box, and if you just untick that, it just takes it away. Now, the same thing applies, but to a smaller scale. If I was wanting to put a section box just around this skylight in the model, if I select this skylight and then hit, see in the, when I've selected an item, this view panel comes up. Everyone see that view panel in the ribbon? There's a little funny icon that actually is section box, and it puts a section box just around the selected item. So there's a section box just around that skylight. So if I wanted to get in there and sort of see how that was looking in the house, and slide it so it's cutting through the skylight, I can get in a lot more detail like that. So it's still the same view, it's just placed a little box around there known as a section box. And then to get out of that, again, just come down and uncheck the section box and we come back to that view. So that's quite a handy thing to use even inside on a floor plan. If you wanted to say, look at the kitchen, I might be thinking, well, I need to look at what's happening with this sink. Put a little section box around it and zoom in. It's gone so small I can't even zoom. There it is. And there's my little section box around the whole model, but it's just cropped in right into that kitchen sink, so I can see where the appliances and the pipe fittings, etc., are underneath, if that's the sort of detail I'm starting to look at. So sometimes some of these models are used by services as well, so they'll be actually like putting electrical switches in under these cabinets in the model, and that's what they use when they're sort of starting to get to that detail, is going in there and making sure that they're at the right heights. Any questions about those?
How do you get back out of that?
Out of that? Yep.
Yeah.
So just
Full house again.
deselect, so you haven't got anything selected, so click the white space, and then over in the properties, scroll down, you'll see the word section box with a tick, untick it. Very handy things, those section boxes, especially looking at those little ones in 3D. So spend the next sort of last 15 minutes just orbiting and going through views and things. Just get comfortable with what we've done. If you know, try to break it, delete things, move things. And next week what we'll do is we'll actually go through start to go through some of the drawing tools, and some of the modified tools will come on the back of that. So all the things like move, copy, trim, all those sorts of commands that we need as part of our drawing set, and also start to draw lines, walls, you know, place objects and families in the drawing. So this is exploring a bit of navigation and interface tonight. Next week we'll start drawing, and then from then on we'll just be drawing and modifying models. When I talked about the shortcuts or hotkeys, there's one I'll give you now. So usually a keyboard shortcut's a couple of letters to do with the name. So move is an M for move, and trim's TR for trim, those sorts of things. The HH and HR don't really relate to anything. I sort of tend to say hide for H, temporary hide. HR, hide reveal, or reveal hidden elements. But there's a shortcut for keyboard shortcuts. Any suggestions or any guesses of what that two-letter shortcut might be? KS. So if you just type in KS, you get all this this dialog box up that's got anything that's pre-named. So some commands don't have a shortcut allocated to it. So modify, for example, tells you that it's MD for modify. Now you can, on your own computers. These ones obviously revert back, but you can actually change or add shortcuts to anything and make them unique. So if you ever get stuck for, oh, what was the shortcut for thing, if you type in KS, you'll get the list. You can just scroll through and say, what was it that I wanted? So the properties palette, that, you know, I showed you how to get back through the view. You know, we lost, if you lose the property, that's PP, properties palette. So if you do lose your properties palette, PP just pops it back up. You don't have to go view, user interface, tick. So things like that becomes quite handy. So that's your first keyboard shortcut. If you remember that one, you'll know them all. KS, remember that one tonight.